Welcome back. We're looking at the 1888 Minneapolis General Conference, and wow, Ellen White herself called it an incomprehensible tug of war.
Yeah, incomprehensible is a strong word, isn't it? It really highlights the tension. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a fundamental clash.
And right at the heart of it were these two younger guys, E.J. Waggoner and A.T. Jones, and their message about righteousness by faith.
That's right. They were focusing intensely on the righteousness of Christ, the complete sacrifice he made. And Ellen White, she recognized its importance immediately. She called it the message for this time. Pretty clear endorsement.
Okay, so if she endorsed it, why the tug of war? Why was it so hard for others to grasp? There's this amazing little detail in one of her letters from the conference.
Oh, the knitting story.
Yeah, she mentions knitting stockings for her son Willie. It seems so domestic, right?
Yeah.
But it symbolized her trying to stay focused on that core Christ-centered message.
But then the letter gets stained.
Exactly. She writes about this great blotch of ink messing up the page. And she uses that blotch, doesn't she, as a symbol for the ugliness of the opposition from the established leaders.
It perfectly captures that contrast, the simple truth versus the messy, bitter conflict. And that conflict had deep roots in a specific theological argument.
The law in Galatians, this seemed to be the flashpoint.
Oh, absolutely. For 40 years, the standard Adventist view, pushed hard by President G.I. Butler and the editor Uriah Smith, was that Paul in Galatians was talking about the ceremonial law, the temple rituals, sacrifices, things fulfilled in Christ.
Makes sense, but Waggoner and Jones came along and said,
they argued it was the moral law, the Ten Commandments, and you can see immediately why that set off alarm bells for the old guard.
Right, because if that law was what Paul was discussing in Galatians in that way, it felt like it could undermine the Sabbath commandment itself, maybe even Ellen White's authority, the testimonies.
Exactly. It felt like pulling a foundational block out. They genuinely feared it could overthrow everything they'd built. The stakes felt incredibly high to them.
And the reaction wasn't just quiet disagreement, was it? Butler actually published a book against Waggoner.
Yeah, 2 years before Minneapolis, an 85-page book called The Law in the Book of Galatians. It was a direct, very public attack trying to shut down Waggoner's view before it even got a major hearing.
Wow. And you have to remember the context, too. The 1880s. This wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. You had Sunday laws popping up all over the United States. For Adventists, this wasn't just politics. It was prophecy unfolding. Revelation 13, the mark of the beast. They felt they were right on the edge of the final crisis.
So any perceived wobble in doctrine felt terrifying, like it could derail their readiness for the end times.
Precisely. It created this intense pressure cooker environment. Leaders like Smith became incredibly resistant to any change, any rethinking of interpretation.
Which brings us to the personalities involved. You mentioned Butler. He sounds like quite a character.
He admitted later he had too much iron in my nature. He saw himself as the guardian, the protector of orthodoxy, relying on his position, his experience.
Sort of the established authority figure pushing back against the young challengers.
Yeah, and Ellen White directly addressed that. She warned against concentrating power, against that spirit of Pharisaism. She kept insisting truth wasn't decided by who had the authority or who held the tradition longest.
What did she say was the right way, then?
Patient Bible study. Humility. A Christ-like spirit. She was really hitting hard on the way they were disagreeing, maybe even more than the disagreement itself.
That's fascinating. So it boils down to these two competing visions. Preservation and tradition on one side.
Led by Butler and Smith.
Versus this call for a kind of radical, Christ-focused renewal from Waggoner Jones, and crucially, backed by Ellen White.
Exactly. And while the specific debates, the horns of Daniel 7, the law in Galatians, those set the stage, Ellen White really pinpointed the biggest failure, the spirit. The harshness, the disrespect between brothers and Christ. That's what she lamented most.
So thinking about this for you, listening today, the real takeaway maybe isn't just about getting the doctrine perfectly right about Galatians.
Right. It seems the deeper issue was about how they treated each other, about grace, about conduct. The theological debate almost became a cover for a spiritual and relational breakdown.
Which leaves us with a pretty challenging thought, doesn't it?
I think so. It makes you ask, what debates or disagreements in our own time, maybe even theological ones, might be masking a similar kind of deeper relational brokenness? What are we potentially sacrificing when we insist on being right, but fail to be Christ-like in how we treat those who see things differently?
Definitely something to think about.